Thank you, Dr. Mashalkar, for your inspiring words. Now, pole vaulting to our next session, I request Dr. Vijay Kelkar, Dr. Surjit Bhalla, Dr. Ajit Ranade to join us on stage for the session titled Imperatives for High Economic Growth. I request Lieutenant General Patankar to introduce the session and the speakers.
After listening to Dr. Mashalkar, most of you would have appreciated or understood why Pune International Center is growing in stature. When you have someone like him at the helm, in school we've learned that as you go higher, the horizon widens. And this is exactly what is happening to the Pune International Center. Thank you very much for your always inspiring words, sir. We now jump straight into the first session, which will be headed by Dr. Vijay Kelkar, who is another colossus that we have at the Pune International Center. And I must share a small aside with you. Every time we compliment Dr. Mashalkar on something, he says, it is all Vijay Kelkar's doing. And when we compliment Vijay Kelkar, he says, after all, Dr. Mashalkar is our president. It all comes from him. But the beneficiaries are the rest of us. So please carry on your debate, sir, because we know who's benefiting from it. With that, may I request the first panelist to come? And as they are settling down, let me also briefly introduce them. Normally, I don't use a script, but with such personalities who are about to take chair, I don't want to be remiss if I forget some of the highlights of their career graph. Dr. Vijay Kelkar is the Vice President of Pune International Center. He has a PhD from the University of California, Berkeley. Dr. Kelkar joined Planning Commission in 1973 and thereafter the Commerce Ministry in 1977 as Economic Advisor, and has since served in various posts, including Secretary to the Economic Advisory Council of the Prime Minister between 1985 and 1988. In 1994, he served as the Petroleum Secretary and Finance Secretary in 1998. Dr. Kelkar was an Executive Director of the International Monetary Fund, overseeing the operations in South Asia during 2000 and 2002. He retired as Chairman of the 13th Finance Commission in the rank of Union Cabinet Minister. He has held several other key positions in the Government of India and was awarded the Padma Vibhushan in 2011. Something which is not stated here, but I'm tempted to add, is he's the architect of the GST, by the way, which finally came to fruition many years after he had initially conceptualized it. Dr. Surjit Bhalla, who would be one of the speakers, is the chairman of the Ministry of Commerce High-Level Advisory Group on Trade and Services, serves as the economic advisor to the 15th Finance Commission. Government of India is very fortunate to have somebody like him as part of their advisory council. He was previously a part-time member of the current Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. Dr. Bhalla has served as a research economist at esteemed institutions such as the RAND Corporation, Brookings, and key departments at the World Bank. Is there anything left? He has authored numerous articles and 4 influential books that delve into the realm of globalization and its impact on global economy. His latest publication, Citizen Raj, Indian Elections 1952 to 2019, presents a comprehensive analysis of the Indian elections during that period. The next speaker, who's not present here but who will be coming online live from Monaco all the way, it's about 5 o'clock there, I think, at this time, is Dr. Ravi Pandit. He's the co-founder and chairman of KPIT Technologies, which is based here in Pune. He's a trustee at the Pune International Center, a former president of the Maharashtra Chamber of Commerce, Industries and Agriculture. He also serves on the board of Finolex Cables. Mr. Pandit was a member of the Government of India core group on the Automotive Research Program and was on the Department of Technology Development Board. He is passionate about the environment, technology, and social policy for a more sustainable world. He is actually a pillar of strength for Pune International Center, which I am aware of. He has co-authored award-winning book, Leapfrogging, the one that has just been mentioned, Leapfrogging to Pole Vaulting and Creating the Magic of Radical Yet Sustainable Transportation, along with Dr. Mashelkar, which was just mentioned. And our last speaker in this first session would be Dr. Ajit Ranade, another pillar of strength. And he was just a few minutes back complimented by our president for assisting us in holding a curtain raiser event a few days back at the Gokhale Institute, which is a historic and a world-renowned institute, which Pune is very proud of. Dr. Ajit Ranade is Vice Chancellor of that institute. He was the Group Executive President and Chief Economist of the Aditya Birla Group. Dr. Ranade is the Chair for Research Advisory Panel for the Indian Institute of Banking and Finance, a Governing Council member of the Center for Advanced Financial Research and Learning, and a member of the Academic Council of the Meghnad Desai Academy of Economics. With a BTech in Electrical Engineering from Indian Institute of Technology, Mumbai, and an alumnus of the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. Again, anything left? He's also the co-founder and trustee of the Association for Democratic Reforms. So politics, economy, engineering, it's all there. Over to you, sir.
Good morning to you all. Let me first thank General Patinkar for a very generous introduction. My only lament is I didn't bring my wife here. You know, by being an army officer's daughter, she believes in army officers. So I will next time, will please send me a recorded version of this. We have three wonderful speakers. I'm not going to speak, I'll speak at the end. So let me invite my very good friend Sujit to make a statement.
Thank you very much, Vijay, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here in a city that I grew up in many, many years ago. I wasn't able to go see my old house, but I hope to see it in the evening. And thank you very much, really, for inviting me for this talk. You know, it is the theme of the conference, as well as the introductory speech yesterday, as well as Mashelkar's comments this morning. I think my talk fits very well into securing India's economic future. And as was rightly mentioned by you, sir, that basically economics is at the core of security. Now, you know, my talk will be in three parts. The first part is on what's happening to economic growth and its related determinants. The second part, woven into the first part, is that we are in an age of narratives. And, you know, there is an excellent book by by Nobel Prize winner, Robert Shiller, called Narrative Economics, how stories go viral and drive major events. And partly because of India's stature and its development, as very well documented just now, over the leapfrogging that has taken place over the last some odd 40 years has caused a narrative to develop. And it's an election year. And in election years, weird things happen. And with social media, the weirdness of things happening has increased exponentially, has pole vaulted. So I will weave that into the discussion as to how all of the narratives prevent us from looking at what we really should be looking at, which will be the third theme or the third portion of my talk. So let's get to the first part. You know, when my first course in economics was at Princeton, and I was an engineer as an undergraduate in 1970. And at that time, all the books, development was a big theme, was just coming into being. McNamara had been appointed as president of the World Bank, and development was the buzzword. Now, for development, what economists at that time were thinking of, the shortest route to development, or necessary component rather, of development was infrastructure. First, physical infrastructure, and very soon afterwards, educational infrastructure. And what we've seen today in India, especially over the last few years, is that the physical infrastructure investment by the government, and you see it physically, I mean, aankho dekha hal, you don't have to read any books or listen to any interviews. You just see the amount of change, infrastructure development that has taken place in India over the last 20 years is really staggering. And I'm not even talking about the infrastructure change in finance tech, which is staggering squared or cubed, since we are in the realm of exponential. And what I find is that the narratives don't really highlight where we are at. So for example, infrastructure investment has really grown. Growth rate is really solid. Now, so while I'm on the growth rate, let me just point this out. And throughout my talk, basically India's economic future, present, started in 1991. What has been remarkable about India's progress over the last 30-odd years is that there has been, with some dips in between, immense continuity in the economic policies of the government. Whether it be the Congress, which started it in 91, or it be the BJP under Bajpayee, 99, 2004, that was actually when the infrastructure development really started, the road networks and various other, and continued, though I think, in my own personal view, it dipped somewhat in the UPA period, and I'll talk about that. But nevertheless, there's been systematic continuity. With the continuity has been a rapid acceleration in reforms over the last decade. How much of that is really recognized? So what we have today is that, we may be having what is it? I don't even know, I had to look it up on Wikipedia or whatever, K-shaped recovery. The narrative is what we are having is a K-shaped recovery. So I asked somebody, what is K-shaped recovery? Oh, the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. So there is some small sector of the economy that is doing well, and that's this arrow, and the rest, 80-90% of the economy is going down this way. Now, how and why this takes hold, this narrative takes hold, is something that I think all of us have to consider before, and what it has a cost. And the cost is the third part of my talk, and the cost is that we don't look at what we should be doing. The reforms are not complete. The economy is not there yet. There is a goal, and incidentally, the goal of a developed economy in 2047 is very much within reach. And I'd be happy to talk as to how, and it doesn't need 8% growth. Okay? Actually, it's a very conservatively needs about 6% per capita growth. And you're there. And I think very likely you'll be there. But I want to come to the rest of it. So that's the narrative is there. Now let's look at some of the facts about Indian growth. First, we are second only to China in its growth rate over the last 30 odd years. And because China's growth rate was, if you will, partly miracle, and now we are seeing the unwinding of the miracle in China, we are not given enough credit for having achieved something equally, clearly not equally miraculous, but I think over a 50-year period, it will be equally miraculous to China. So and India-China comparison is a very, very useful one on many counts. First, between 1500 and 1980, India and China, 1500 to 1980, 480 years, India and China had the same per capita income level. This is in PPP terms, etc. Same per capita income level. Plus minus 10%, sometimes China is ahead, sometimes India is ahead, the same. China started its reforms in 1978. They had about a 13-year lead on us. And with that 13-year lead, their per capita income level today is about 2.5 times that of India. We have done well, but China has done exceptionally well. Another thing to note about India and China and the parallels, and that will yields insights into the differences of India and China's growth and the differences in their future. In 1974, we were all concerned about the population problem. And there was sterilization. And there was massive opposition. The government lost. So the entire experiment with controlling population through extra economic means came to an end rather rapidly. China instead, 1979, started its one-child policy. We couldn't implement a sterilization policy, thank God. But China implemented a one-child policy. And I think the future, the next 20 years, including now, is going to show that who was the more miraculous economy and the wiser economy. China is in big time trouble, but let's not go into the future. Let's just look at over the last decade, 2010 to 2019. So that decade, just before COVID, not enough recognized. Per capita income growth in India was 1 percentage point a year faster than that of China. So with that backdrop, and again, when I mention that, etc., people look aghast. And because what was the narrative in India? The narrative in India was that our growth rate had declined from something like 8.5% to actually we reached 3.7% in 2019-20. And I won't go into, I've done enough of writing on what happened and why did we reach 3.7%. But nevertheless, during the same time period, China went from 11 to 5 or 4.5. That never got the international attention. What is going wrong, this, that. We got the international attention, we got the blame, and the narrative became that there was a leading economist who said that really India's GDP growth was only 3%, 3 to 4%. Again, narrative. This is a leading economist. He was a major person in the government. So when I repeated his exercise of why India's growth rate was understated from 8%, 8.5%, or 7% to 3.5%, I repeated his exact same, this is Arvind Subramaniam, exact same exercise for 50 other countries. Okay? 50 other countries. And what do you find? The country with the most overstated GDP growth by the Subramaniam method was Germany. India was just a minor adjustment, etc. Germany comes out. So I want to emphasize, the only way we can progressively really go forward is by really looking at the issues. There are lots of debates, there should be lots of debates, but I think credit should be given where credit is due, and blame should be allocated where blame has to be allocated, rather than getting sidetracked. Let me give you another example of the sidetrap. A very common theme, again by leading economists in India, leading ex-policy makers in India, is that government investment has really gone up. But the private sector is not participating. Okay. And we need the private sector to participate in the investment. Now, the government investment is a rather small, a third maybe, maximum fraction of total investment. But let me give you some statistics on what is happening to investment in India and why I'm very confident that we are targets of growth rates of 6.5%, 7%, 7.5% will be easily achievable. So we know that investment is a major portion, right, determinant of growth. Now, how do you measure, and what is going around now, the narrative is India's investment rate is only about 29%. And during 2004 and 11, our golden years of investment and growth, we were investing 35%, okay? 35% of GDP we were investing, and now we are only investing 29%. There's even books out on this very recently by senior policymakers. And that's why India is in a not such a good place. Let me just, how is investment measured? You take nominal investment rate, this 129%, the numerator is nominal investment. The denominator is nominal GDP. But really, as economists, the first thing you think about is you need to adjust things for prices. You need to look at the ratio of real investment to real GDP in order to find out what its effects on growth would be. Nobody uses nominal investment. You use it as a shortcut. But really, you should do a little homework. When you do this homework, let me read you the following. The nominal investment to GDP ratio in 2004 to 2013 was 33.2%. 2014 to 2022, 35.3%. But as I said, I don't like nominal investment to nominal GDP. Let's look at real investment to real GDP. 2004 to 2013 is 35.3%. 2014 to 2022, 33%. Let's take 2023, April, June, quarter, 35.5%, very close to the peak investment rate of something like 37%. And this is before the second quarter data comes out. So again, our narratives may tell you different, but we are in a very, very sweet spot of growth. Okay. I have a few more comments. How much time do I have?
7 minutes.
7 minutes more. Huh?
Generous.
Okay. Now let's look at human capital, the other determinant of growth. Again, a remarkable change has taken place. Increase has taken place. Today, if you look at the ages 15 to 24, okay, which is really, no point looking at what your human capital is or whatever of 50 to above when you have people like me, or 60 and above. That's not what is determining. That's the grandmother problem, hangover problem. You got to look at the flow and the recent flow. 15 to 24, women, average educational attainment by women, 9.8 years, by men, 10 years. We have now achieved parity in women's education and men's education. And we saw an example yesterday, and I pointed that out. Very strange that 3 out of the 4 awardees were women. Now, there's a narrative going on. Here are all these women getting educated. Okay, number one. Number two, they're working. Did you know that the largest fraction of female pilots in the world is right here in India? 15%, 1/5, when the world average is something close to 5%. 15% of our pilots are women. As I said, the world average is 3-4%. Let's look at STEM, your field. In STEM, in about 4 years ago, so the data, latest data we need to gather, 4 years ago, the US, 31% of women students in the US were in STEM disciplines. In India, 43%. One of the highest in the world. Actually, it is the highest if you take out 2 small countries here and there. So we have done radical changes have taken place in a large part of human capital, half of the labor force almost. But then you have the narrative. Always beware the narrative. The narrative is women in India don't work. They've got educated, they're in STEM disciplines, they go home and make babies. But they're not making babies anymore. The fertility rate in India is now 2, okay? Where the replacement rate is 2.2. There are only 2 states with a fertility rate more than 2.2. UP at 2.4 and Bihar at 3. And many states are significantly below 2. So we are in the throes of a labor market problem of too few workers rather than too many. But the narrative is women don't work, and there is the CMIE survey, a reputable firm, which all of us use data from CMIE. I think when I worked on taxes, etc., I used the data on CMIE, macro data, what's happening to firms and their earnings. But now they become the leaders of providing you data. And their data on labor force participation rate for women is 8%, which is lower than Yemen. and lower than Iraq. We are the lowest in the world according to CMIE in terms of women working. Now, how? And I'm afraid I'm about the only person who questions this. Nobody else questions this. Matter of fact, Ashoka University had a whole department devoted to analysis of CMI data with this on labor force. I mean, sometimes I really wonder. There has been a rapid increase in labor force participation rate according to PLFS data, and we are now at the highest labor force participation rate since about 1993. So the U-shaped curve has taken place, and we are going to soon exceed it. But the narrative tells you something else. Then manufacturing. We are not doing enough in manufacturing. And we point to Vietnam, we point to Bangladesh, and so on and so forth. Incidentally, part of the narrative is Bangladesh is doing very well. And they just came to the fund for some help. And maybe I don't have the time about how the GDP growth rate in Bangladesh is really, really problematical. But never mind. I'll leave Bangladesh out for the moment. That we have, so the narrative is that we are not in manufacturing enough. Goldar has just done 2 papers, and it's the same bit of analysis that I have done for overall investment, he's done for manufacturing. You look at the price of manufacturing goods. Around the world and in India, there's a steep decline. So therefore, once you adjust in real terms, you find that India's manufacturing is about 4-5 percentage points higher share of manufacturing than given by the nominal data. Okay, now let me quickly move on. I want to get to, then I won't even go into poverty, which is another, that nothing has happened to poverty change. Poverty levels in India still at 20%. It was at 20% in 2011, and it's at 20% now. Just a minor footnote on the 20%. Where do they get that number? That number is from the 2011-12 consumer survey, which had that 23% of the population was poor. But in that very same year, we had another NSS survey, which is now the official survey, that fruits and vegetables and perishables you measure on a 1-week recall basis rather than on a 30-day basis. Just that change, which is now official policy in India, just that change made it 13% in 2011. So ये जो 20% है, it's beyond nonsense. And the fact that leading economists do this, that's why I'm saying, we get away from reality by getting into these unnecessary false narratives. And they're always at the expense, we are not doing as well as we are. Why that is, maybe, I don't think, I read The Argumentative Indian, but I don't think that's the true intent of the argument. We love to debate. That's what I'm trying to do over here. I'm being an argumentative Indian, but I'm saying not enough of the Indians are argumentative enough about basic facts. So, look, I'll now conclude in about 5 minutes about the challenges facing us. And bottom line, we are in a sweet spot of growth. Very difficult to derail this. Internationally, domestically, this is our moment. And since 91, I've been writing every decade. I've written columns saying, this is India's decade. 91, 2001, 2011, 2021. And, people sort of not necessarily laughed at me, but thought I was a bit crazy. But if you look at it, each of those decades have been pretty much right. And especially the 2011 onwards, given that we even grew faster than China. So now to the challenges. Look, First, I think we need to rethink education. And, college students around the world, and this was all of us participated in this, go forth and educate, go forth and go to college. I'll give you one simple statistic on how the consequences of that. And we are not the only ones thinking, go forth and educate, go forth and go to college. In 1993, there were 50 million college graduates flow in the advanced countries, 50 million. And in the rest of the world, which is 4/5 of the population, there were 50 million. India, Africa, Eastern Europe, etc. Latin America, 50 million, the same. From 1993 to now, the flow of college graduates in the advanced countries has gone from about 53 to 63. In the rest of the world, it's gone from 53 to 303. There is a global glut of people with college degrees. It shows up in our data. You look at college graduates' growth rate, salaried jobs. Between 2011, the real wage, PLFS data, real wage for salaried people has gone up maybe 1% a year. The real wage for non-salaried people has gone up about 3-4% a year. So something we need to rethink. Second, on the schools and colleges, we have an excess infrastructure problem. The flow of kids coming in is really way down and will go down further. So we need to rethink education. Second, freebies versus cash transfers. We have this, and the government of India has been very successful in using this and being a pioneer, fintech, around the world. And that is, what does that do? It fixes leakages. You want to give to the rich people, you give, right? And you know you're giving to the rich people. Previously, we gave to anybody but the poor. And we said we were removing poverty, etc., whereas most of the money was being skimmed by the very well-off, or the middle class, and so on and so forth. And the same story with freebies. You want to spend money on education, on giving free bus tickets or whatever else to women and not to men. Simple thing, you think there is a problem, a deficiency, and of course there is a deficiency in the amount of income maybe a third of the population has. So all the freebies, whatever you want to give, it should be given as part of cash transfers, not as part of direct, you go ahead and give them money directly in terms of general bus tickets, for example. So get away from the freebies which do not have checks and balances. Cash transfers has enormous checks and balances. Last, and maybe in the discussion I'll have more to say on this, delimitation. Every year that goes by, at least my respect for the US Constitution, except for the gun control nonsense, was the most foresighted document ever. In 1776, they envisioned the delimitation problem, and therefore they invented the Senate. People's representatives are there, and that's based on population. But there is a Senate, and each state, as you know, has 2 senators. So Wyoming has just as much influence as California. So either we come up with something like that, in order, which I think may be a tall order. So therefore, my conclusion, so either we come up with a really enlightened new constitution in that regard. Our constitution is very good, but has, I think, a lot of problems. But every constitution has problems. So I don't want to go their route. But basically, we need to solve the delimitation problem. And again, our governments since 1971 have had the foresight of kicking the can down the road. There has been no delimitation exercise since 1971 because of the fissures it will cause and legitimate. I was on the Finance Commission, etc. This was being discussed 3 years, 4 years ago, etc., how to allocate the differential growth between the South and the North. And one remedy might very well be to keep kicking the can down the road. You have more representatives from, and do it the IMF model on quotas. The share is fixed, and after that, it keeps going. The IMF has been trying for years, वहाँ भी कुछ नहीं होना, and hopefully यहाँ पे भी कुछ नहीं होना. You will have a larger parliament, right? Absolutely, both Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha, but the shares of each state will remain the same. On that optimistic note, I'll stop, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Surjit, for absolutely brilliant. As I said, I'll make my remarks at the end. Now, next speaker is our own trustee of the PIC and treasurer of the PIC, Ravi Pandit. He'll be joining us online.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here in this conference. And, PDNS is a very important initiative of PIC and the associated organizations. And I really want to compliment PIC, but especially General Partner for really doing it in a very consistent way. So the topic for this session is imperatives for high economic growth. And what I would like to do is to touch aspect of that. I'll talk a bit about the importance of economic growth in the context of national security, which is what PDN is about, and talk about a couple of industries which can make a big impact on the economic growth and also on the economic security. So, we all know that the only defense that a nation ultimately has is a healthy population, equitable distribution of wealth, education, and a cohesive population. We all know that. And if you look at various studies across the millennia about which societies have succeeded and which have not, a common factor is the alignment of the local population to the state. So if there is a apathy of the local population towards the maintenance of the society, the society becomes weak. If there is a commitment, society becomes strong. And it is really related to whether the population feels that there is wealth for them coming in the way, and whether they feel that the future is good for them economically, the nation becomes more secure. And a small push by an external force can bring a house crumbling down if it is already corroded by a corrupt, divided, unhappy population, where the rich are frivolous and the poor are apathetic. I think this is a core of national security. And I personally believe that national security is not the job of the armed forces alone, nor also of the government, but for all of us, because I think each one of us has a responsibility towards development of a healthy, prosperous, educated, equitable, and cohesive population. Now, the question that was posed to me is that which technologies and which industries will contribute to making such a society? Which technologies, which industries will bring in economic security or the lack of economic security, which will bring in energy security or the lack of it, in the years to come. And, to me, there are 4 or 5 which come to my mind immediately. And, they include of course, energy, and I'll talk a bit about energy. They include artificial intelligence, because I think no talk of technology nowadays will be complete without talking about artificial intelligence. It also includes synthetic biology, robotics, and two, three others. But I would prefer to talk only about energy and AI today, and maybe the others we can talk about it some other time. I believe that, and let me first talk about the energy part. I believe that energy is our Achilles heel. At the same time, it has the promise of being the nirvana for our society. And this is particularly so in the context of a world which is moving from fossil fuels to the renewable energy. And this presents to us an opportunity to make a big change from the current situation, where fossil fuel import has two, in my opinion, deleterious effects. One is that it's a fairly large component of our balance of payments, of our imports, and therefore is a drain on our society. Secondly, it is also a situation where a lot of us pay and only few of us receive. And in this case, those few are really the international suppliers of energy. And there is a possibility that this can change as we move from fossil to the renewable energy. And let me talk about each one of these aspects of energy a little bit going forward. We all know that the all source of energy is really the sun, which more or less shines equally on all countries. However, the technologies to capture, to store, and to use this energy vary significantly from country to country, giving rise to concerns about standard of living of various nations, as well as the energy security of the nations. I want to talk about this a little bit by looking at various components of energy and where do we stand and where we can be if we really make a change in some course. And I want to break this down into energy, solar energy, the energy storage technologies, the non-solar energy, etc., and where are we in this connection? So, solar energy, we all know that India has given a serious push to the growth of solar energy through the solar photovoltaic cells. And it's a well-known fact that the capacity that has been put on for solar energy has been going up very substantially in the years. Possibly the fastest growing solar market is India. However, the core of this technology, namely the solar photovoltaic cells, are all imported, mostly from China. China accounts for 84% of global solar cell exports. 50% of the global production of photovoltaic cells is controlled by China. The Chinese selling prices are 50% of the European costs. And it has created a glut now in the PV cells. If you go one level lower in solar cells, it is polysilicon, which is really the fundamental material for solar photovoltaic cells. 94% of the global production of polysilicon comes from China. So if you were to look at solar energy, we can see that this is the future, but the real core technology and the core material is all imported. Now, you generate energy and then you store energy because sun doesn't shine all the time, wind doesn't blow all the time. And so therefore there is need for storage. And without storage, actually renewable energy cannot work. Now, if you were to look at energy storage through batteries, globally, the workhorse for energy storage is the lithium-ion battery. I mean, that is what we use in our cell phones, and that is what is being used increasingly in our cars. So while our country is doing a lot of packaging of batteries, the manufacturing of battery cells is still not done in India. Global lithium cell manufacturing is controlled by China. 80% of manufacture, again, 50% of global exports come from China. Going a step beyond, the material required for lithium-ion battery are again largely controlled by China. The processing technologies are very critical. 44% of global processing is done by China. Step behind processing part is really the actual control of minerals. Now, lithium is, of course, spread across 5 or 6 countries in the world, but the ownership of mines is also now progressively getting controlled by China. So we can see that in an area where we have a potential to grow, because as I said, sun shines everywhere. The core area of solar energy and battery storage, we have a serious concern because I think the technologies as well as the actual products come from outside. The second thing that is being looked at by most of the countries in the world is hydrogen. Actually, I'm here in Monaco on a global hydrogen conference. So hydrogen is progressively being recognized as a clean energy carrier whose usage does not generate any unhealthy emissions. There is a clear preference for usage of hydrogen in large mobility applications like long distance trucks and buses, ships, progressively over aeroplanes. Hydrogen is also used actually in hard to abate sectors like steel, cement, fertilizer, etc. The current popular route for generation of hydrogen is through electrolysis of water by using electrolyzers. The most efficient use of consumption of hydrogen is in fuel cells. Now, if you were to look at electrolyzers, we are getting into the manufacturing of electrolyzers, but actually no Indian company has homegrown solution for that. If you were to look at fuel cells, which is about the usage of hydrogen for conversion into energy, actually excepting for our company, no other Indian company has gone for manufacture of fuel cells on its own. So, in both these areas, whether it is on batteries or in hydrogen, I think we are a little bit on a weaker side in terms of core technology development. And these are the areas which can make a big impact on all national economies in the years to come. The third area is, of course, and which is where I feel very, very bullish, is over the years we will have possibly nuclear, desktop fission or fusion technologies, which can really bring in clean, limitless power. India is known as a nuclear power. There is actually not much of research being done on the cutting edge technologies of desktop fission or fusion. These are smaller technologies, less expensive, far more safer. And I think over a period, maybe in the next 2 or 3 decades, this could be the source of ultimate clean energy solution. This is also an area where we really need to do a lot more than what we are doing currently. Clearly our conditions on the clean energy are really precarious. The good news is that this government has over the past few years taken many steps to correct this situation through the PLI schemes. But the PLI schemes is more focused on a manufacturing base and not so much of R&D. And I think that's an area where as a country that we need to really look at. So the question is, how do we look at the issue of R&D in new technologies? I spoke about how over the last 2 decades or so, the world has moved on these technologies and we have not done really well. And this is an area where we really need to do much more for our economic security as well as for our physical security. The good news about technology development is that the technology train is moving continuously. And if we have missed it at one station, we can always catch it at the next station. But we have to be on the continuous lookout for the next station, and we have to get ready to board the train at the next station. So, for example, if you have to look at, say, solar energy generation, the current focus is on the usage of silicon. But perovskite scales are on the horizon. Those cells can promise to be even more efficient than the current ones. And if we work on that, we will catch the next train. Lithium ion is the workhorse today of energy storage, but sodium ion is on the horizon. If we can focus on that technology, we can do well. So, one doesn't have to be despondent that we have lost a couple of decades, which actually China really focused on all these new energy areas. But, we have to be really working on what is on the horizon and how do we catch the next train. So how do we do that? I think that's the question to ask. The question to ask is, are we investing enough in R&D? And I think the statistics in that case is really not very encouraging. So, the statistics, this is what it is. 0.65% of our GDP is invested in research and development. In China, it is 2.1%. In US, it is 2.8%. In Germany, it is 3%. In Israel, it is 5%. So our investment in research and development really needs a big push. 60% of our investments come from the public sector. So really the culprit here is the private sector investment. The public sector investments in India are 0.36%, whereas in the US it's 0.28%, in Israel it's 0.7%. So we are investing relatively more from the public sector and relatively less from the private sector. The private sector spend is the problem. The problem with public sector R&D is its efficacy. So I think it's important that we really need to push our investment in R&D in these technologies, because especially when it comes to clean energy, this, as I said, can be our nirvana. The main trends here are move from fossil to new energy. The second trend is, this whole area of climate, etc. The third thing is that currently our energy consumption is about 1/10 the US energy consumption per capita per annum. And as we develop, obviously that consumption is going to go up. It should, because it's a good index of a nation's prosperity. And the need to make this transformation to new technology energies is very important, and that is what we really need to do. So what is it that we need to do to increase our R&D and to increase our efficacy of R&D? And I have a few suggestions, because to me, this is an important industry where we really need to work on. So I think it is important that we throw the public sector, R&D, public sector R&D open to academic institutions as well as to private sector companies, in addition to the national science labs. I think it's very important to do that. We also need to tread the untrodden paths. For example, focus on biohydrogen, which can use large tracts of India's degraded lands to generate hydrogen, then working only on electrolysis. Our working shows enormous potential in this area. Our working shows enormous potential on geothermal energy, on white hydrogen drilling, on pumped hydro. These are the new technologies that we can use. We have to think away from what the rest of the world is thinking in these areas, because our solutions are directed to our problems, and our problems are somewhat different than others. I also think that we need to create incentives for private sector R&D. The current PLI is for exports rather than for, the current PLI is really for domestic market. If we push our R&D for the PLI for exports, I think our companies will build global technologies rather than, technologies which can really focus only on the domestic market. I believe it's important that we float technology challenges, and we also do provide a minimum purchase guarantee for meeting certain quality and cost parameters. Dr. Mashelkar has done exceedingly important work on how do you give minimum purchase guarantees through governmental programs. I think that is something that we need to do, because finally that will help private sector to actually spend on R&D where they can see some income coming further. At a broader level, the next suggestion I have is, at a broader level, we must recognize that world over, new technology development and capture of export markets is done by a handful private companies who need government blessings. If you were to look at Korea, Japan, even America, their companies have grown, they have become global because there is support from the government. Unfortunately, in India, any collaboration between private companies and the government is frowned upon as crony capitalism. We have the case of Tata's being thrown out of West Bengal. We have now the case of, the two prominent industries being frowned upon because the government is in cohorts with them. So I think we really need to develop a healthy mechanism for a public-private partnership, because that partnership is important for us to grow, especially in the new areas, which are going to make a big impact. In this area of new energy, China started investing 20 years ago. And China has gained enormously from that. As I said earlier, they really dominate the world. Their power is not just the economic power, but it's also an issue as to how they can control global security. In the recent past, two materials, germanium and germanium and one other material, I forget the name just now, is something that China controls, and they have said that they are not going to give that material abroad. Gallium and germanium, and they said they have put export restrictions, really putting a tight control on the rest of the world. They recently announced that they are going to restrict the export of graphite. Now, graphite is a material which is required for batteries. China currently exports 67% of global graphite. They have 90%. They make 90% of world's natural graphite and 70% of world's synthetic graphite. So control on these kind of technologies has an effect on the economic security of countries like us. So so this was the first industry that I wanted to talk about, where we can really can make a change, and we need to make a change. The second industry, which is attracting a lot of attention in the last few years, is artificial intelligence, and I want to speak a bit about that. As is the case with any new technology when it is introduced, any transformational technology when it is introduced, there are extreme fears and there are unreasonable hopes. And we have seen that when the internet was introduced. And what is the experience is that there is an overestimation in the short term, and there is an underestimation in the long run. And the reality is somewhere between under and overestimation. Now, in the context of AI, questions are being raised. There are questions such as, will AI create massive unemployment? Will it mean that the experts' jobs will be taken by machines, and even experts will have no role to play? Will there be no need for any workers at all? Will wars be executed by robots enabled by AI, and there will be no need of soldiers at all? We probably know that US has now commissioned Robo Wingman for aerial combat. Will robots aided by AI run dark or lights out factories completely without any human beings at all? At the far end, will machines take over and rule over mankind? And this thing that has been talked about by actually AI scientists is that, is humanity only a phase in the evolution of intelligence from the inanimate to super intelligence, and that we might be just taken over by AI in times to come? So this is one end. These are the kind of fears which are being expressed. On the other hand, there are these possible things that shall we live in a world where all dirty, dangerous, and treacherous work will be taken over by machines, and we can all enjoy 3-day work weeks? Will this bring enormous prosperity?
Ravi, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Just 3 more minutes because one more speaker to come.
Yeah. I'll come to closure very quickly. So will it bring enormous prosperity? Will we be able to do only 15-hour work week? All these possibilities now exist. And actually the answers to all these questions really may well be yes. Now, and country which is known for its IT power is really most likely, a country like India has an ability to really control and develop this technology, and which can make a big impact for our society. This is something which can be immensely useful in key areas like medicine, like education, even like in the area of manufacturing in times to come. This is an area where we need to take a lead. Here again, US and China are in the lead, but we have an extremely high population of talented software engineers, which can really bring this artificial intelligence. What we have seen just now is a short, I should say, a trailer of artificial intelligence, which is the ChatGPT. But artificial general intelligence is something which is most likely to come. And that is an area where we need to work on. Now, the question is, how do we address this new technology? Currently world over, the question is, how does it affect privacy? How does it affect confidentiality of information? But a broader question is, how does it affect the future of mankind? And those of us who have been following the current happenings at OpenAI, world's leading artificial intelligence company will know that there is this whole question about who controls what. I think this is an area which is going to be extremely dominant in the years to come, and that's the second area where we need to work. As I said earlier, there is much other work to be done in areas such as synthetic biology or robotics, etc., but I'll keep it for some other time. My conviction is that we need to work on specific industries to create economic security for us. We need to create specific industries to ensure that the economic growth is shared by all, the fruits of economic growth is shared by all. And these are the kind of industries that we really need to work on. I thought I should bring out these technologies or industries where we need to focus in order to ensure that in the years to come, our economic growth is ensured in a very equitable manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ravi. Now we have last speaker, Professor Ajit Ranade. He has the floor.
With the chair's permission, I'm going to speak from here. Both my earlier speakers have been very energetic. So as far as Ravi Pandit is concerned, I have nothing to disagree. As far as Dr. Surjit Bharla is concerned, his energetic and optimism is very infectious. So I largely agree with him, but I disagree about a few things like female labor supply and the K-shaped recovery and inequality, but I'll come to that. And we celebrate ladies, winners, but when I look at the Pune Dialogue on National Security, the 8th edition, I look around, so there are like 3% women here, sir. So we need to do something about that. That if we really believe that the women are going to contribute in a big way to what we are trying to do, not 50%, but so General Shami Mehta and General Patankar is not here. Please take note, but I otherwise agree with the prognosis. See, the session is on the imperatives of economic growth, okay? So economics said, everybody's saying it, I think this audience doesn't need convincing, but let's say it again and again. Economics is at the very heart, of security. It actually, economic strength underpins. What does it underpin? General Shami, you said three words, Dr. Marshallkar, 3 words. So 3 words for you. Protect, project, preserve. Economic strength, economic prosperity, economic stability helps us protect ourselves, our people from aggressors, whatever, protect. It helps us project. What do we project? Project power. Why do we need power? We need power to exert influence, to exert, like they say, don't be a rule, be a rule maker. Don't be a taker, but make a rule maker. So we need to project power. Now you can say it can be hard power, soft power, wo baad mein baat karenge. So protect our people, project our power, and preserve our sovereignty. Preserve or maintain our sovereignty. What does it mean? We don't want anybody else to tell us how to run. We got that independence in 1947. We want to run our own nation. We want nobody else to be interfering in our internal affairs. We want to have autonomy on our decision making. We want to be able to control our resources. We want, so I don't need to, of course, convince you about sovereignty. So protect ourselves, our nation from aggressors, project our power internationally, globally, and preserve our sovereignty. ये करने के लिए economic strength is an imperative. End of talk. Anyway, I'm going to continue. So I hope, but let me just expand on this. Basically, if you have economic power, if you have economic prosperity, if you have built economic, strength, there are 5 things I just want to mention. One is that you have better flexibility in resource allocation. We are struggling, OROP के लिए debate बाद में करेंगे. But why this Agniveer, which the Chief of Army Staff told us, my feeling is it's not the best perfect solution. But because fiscally we are in a tight situation. If you want more resource allocation for modernization, for technology, for the ability, for pensions, for the armed forces, for military, all kinds of stuff. Yeah, we need more resources. For that resource allocation, we need economic prosperity. Number 1. Second, for technological advances, for investing in, Ravi Pandit kept saying we need to invest more. So you need economic prosperity for that. Political stability. I submit to you, if you have economic growth and higher per capita incomes, you'll have less conflict in the country, less people vying for reservations, less people, knocking on the doors of government jobs. Again, economic strength is required. Otherwise, you have constantly, for 100 jobs in the UP government, 1 million people applying, including PhDs. This is not economic strength. We also need economic strength for global influence, because we want to have an influence in international affairs. We want to be rule makers, whether it's trade negotiations, climate negotiations, historic injustices, whatever. For that, you need to be, nobody is going to listen to you if you're not economically powerful. I know I'm saying something which everybody is convinced about, but I need to reiterate it. Energy and resource security. That has been said several times by Ravi. Imagine we are, this combination of hydrogen and solar can make us from an energy deficient to energy surplus country. But for that, we need to invest in technology. India is blessed with 300 days of sunshine, or if not 350 days of sunshine. And hydrogen, when you burn hydrogen, you get water. It's the cleanest fuel imaginable. But it requires, so that also needs economic growth. And of course, finally, economic leverage. Economic strength gives you economic leverage. So so I hope I have convinced you that economics is at the very heart of security, what we are saying. Counter question: is it possible to be globally powerful or have security or power without economic strength? I know General Shami Mehta is going to say no, but let me just, because there might be some people who have some doubts. So there's North Korea, there's the erstwhile USSR. So it is possible that you overspend on military, and thode din ke liye aapko lagega ki you're powerful. But it is not sustainable. Second, you might actually have power through what is called soft power, cultural power, diplomatic power. But that I don't think ultimately is as sustainable. Of course, India have, even at a lower stage of per capita income, perhaps we have soft power. I don't know. This is Joseph Nye, right? He coined this phrase. So we can have soft power by projecting cultural, we are an ancient civilization, heritage of our philosophy, Vedantic philosophy, and so on and so forth. But that's another, I submit to you thoda possibility, but I'm not so sure that is really sustainable. Thirdly, you may have power because of historic legacy. You're a former colonial power. We have a small country, as you know, in Europe. They thought, the sun never set on the empire. So, thoda legacy, colonial legacy. You know why they say the sun never set on the British Empire? Because even the sun could not trust the British in the dark. But so there may be power deriving from historic legacy, but that's still not economic strength. If you're not economically powerful, you might get power because of alliances. This session is not about Israel, but Israel, relatively small country, but powerful alliance. So there is power from that, but I don't think that is something that we need to explore. I'm just saying that can we get this security interest served by ignoring economic interests? So I'm just trying to give you some people may say there might be exceptions. Or resource control, Saudi Arabia. If you are controlling the oil supply of the world, can you be powerful without being economically powerful? If you are an oil country, like Venezuela, right? Venezuela is an example where they control a key resource called oil. But still, I hope these examples will convince you that is not the way. Ultimately, economics is at the very heart of our security interests. In fact, as I keep quoting with permission from you, General Shami Mehta says, this is the campaign. Economic prosperity of India, economic strength of India is the campaign. All the other things are battles, whether it's security, digital public goods, military modernization. These are smaller, these are battles, but the campaign is economic security. So now we come to, I want to just spend 2-3 minutes on agreeing with Mr. Surjit Bhalla. This session is not for disagreement, but I like to, he's an old friend and I like to chew his ears. And so I actually think India is definitely something that is, in some respects, spectacular and really unique experience as a modern nation. Number one, the only country in modern world which had the adult franchise from day one. One person, one vote. Rich or poor, male or female, Hindu or Muslim, sabko ek vote if you're adult. No other country has tried out that. Some people said this is stupid. This is going to be dangerous, disastrous. You need to first have some literacy. You need to have some prosperity, but we adopted that from day one. Second, as Sujit also mentioned, from 1978 onwards or 79, we have for 40 long years we have never had a year of GDP contraction. GDP was always expanding at maybe plus, the rates varied. This is not easy. 40 long years where there were episodes of droughts, of natural disasters, of the East Asian crisis, of border conflict, of there was sanctions, nuclear sanctions against India. It was only COVID, that was the year when we had a negative growth rate. But this is a year when lots of Western countries, many countries had recessions, maybe contractions. Of course, you are going to mention this northern neighbor, but we'll come to that in a minute. So this is the resilience. This is a spectacular achievement, I think. Then our capital output ratio. They say China achieved, so I have to mention the word China. It came after 7 minutes, please note, I didn't mention it. So the word China. So China achieved 10% growth, but 50% investment rate. India achieved 7% growth at 35%. So bang for the buck. 1 rupee invest karo, you get 0.25% growth. 1 rupee invest karo, you get only 0.1%. Look, do the math. We are not taking away from China's success, but so we have been using our capital more frugally. We need to increase our investment rate, but let's not forget over long 30 years that Sujit mentioned, actually our growth rate, which is 2-3 percentage points lower during that 30-year period, was achieved at a much lower investment rate. So frugal, more efficient capital output ratio. Consistently high savings rate. Despite being a low per capita income country, our household savings rate has been extremely consistent and resilient, which is a very important, savings rate is it's not an economic thing, it's a cultural thing. We need to find out and we need to really nurture, celebrate, protect. Software story. Actually, today India is like, what, $250 billion? But NASSCOM is saying 500 billion is right around the corner. And we take it for granted, but it's just an outstanding story. At one point, I'm told that 40% of India's income tax earnings, 40% of India's income tax earnings were coming from the software sector alone. Not from the software companies, which were enjoying tax holidays, but from the employees, from the ESOP earners. This was some time ago, this is not today, and this is something which you can verify from NASSCOM, but it's an amazing story. It's an amazing story. I like to believe that there's an international episode which benefited us, not to take away their credit, the so-called Y2K story. So if you remember the Y2K. But anyways, the software story of India is an outstanding success. Finally, since Mr. Mashelkar always tries to talk about exponential achievements, he mentioned the data, but let's not forget, I want to tell you a story, just 2 minutes. There was a company in the world which had the second biggest e-commerce country in the world, or in Asia at least. Something like 300 million, this was 20 years ago, okay. This was a company which was the second largest e-commerce company, but e-commerce, okay, e-commerce, online, internet, but almost 80-90% of its customers did not have a credit card, did not have a debit card, did not have internet access at home, did not have, were not digitally literate. How did that happen? Because they were going to cafes, because they were going through agents, and they were making payments to scratch cards. You have to buy some from Kirana store, you have to buy scratch cards. Some of you are old enough here, but the youngsters sitting at the back, they're wondering, ye kaun si company hai? Aajkal to Amazon, the e-commerce, Amazon. In 2023, it sounds, but this is a story from 2005, 2004. Do you know which company I'm talking about? Sir, this is a quiz. If PDNS ka success is pay dependent hai. Somebody has to answer this question. 200 to 300 million transactions a year. Average ticket size, not even $1, $2, $3. The company is notoriously called IRCTC. Oh, this company flourished at a time when, this was 15, 20 years ago. So when you talk about your exponential thing, let's not forget successes like that. Of course, let's remember, apart from what you mentioned, JDOI, Jandan Yojana ka jo account opening tha, we went from something like, 100 million to 500 million, 2 years. 460, almost 500 million. But of course, the real silent warriors, the diehard workers, were the public sector bank employees. The penetration of JDY by private sector banks, I'm sorry to say, is not even 3 or 4%. So all the hard work, the midnight oil was burned by the public sector employees. But this is not a debate here about whether how much banks should be in the private or public sector, but please remember their contribution. Or Aadhaar, the proliferation of Aadhaar. You mentioned LEDs. So anyway, this is all about the fact that I agree with Surjit, that these are the things sometimes we don't highlight enough. So we have these potential sparks of strength, economic strength and potential. So I now come to narratives. So 3-4 minutes. So Surjit keeps saying these 3 words which I'm extremely allergic about, but I can't help it because we live with them. One is woke, W-O-K-E. Ye word 15 saal pehle nahi tha. Now everybody uses it all the time. Folks, you know about it, na? I'm very allergic to it. But secondly, ecosystem. You heard about this word. It's being bandied around left and right. Ecosystem probably comes from biology or something. Third, narratives. Our friend is also using it. अरे इनको ये तो narrative चला रहे हैं, ये तो agenda चला रहे हैं. So why are we constantly saying, people like Surjit are complaining, they misunderstand us. And the narrative going around the world is this, is that, India, you know what I mean? That people are saying, economists, so there are only 2 explanations. Either there is a sazish, there is a conspiracy against India. This is the standard, there is a Tukre gang around all over the world. They hang out in Wall Street Journal, in Economist magazine, in New York Times, probably Soros ke gang mein, फिर California mein. So there are only 2 explanations. My second explanation, I'm going to, why is the world so bothered about India? Sazish, conspiracy. Otherwise, I fail to understand why are we saying, there is a narrative. The second explanation, according to me, is that we are failing in our own communication. We have to have a so-called counter-narrative. We are not able to communicate to the world what we are all about. See, the rise of China causes anxiety, nervousness, unease. But the rise of India is always seen as benign, as non-threatening. Why is that not being articulated? Why is the communication failing? Why is constantly this whining and whining about, they are against India. Sab jagah wo pura anti-India campaign chala. Boss, narratives. So, it's all about, I agree that it's more about psychology and less about economics. So, when they say, are you an optimist or a pessimist? Ye narrative ki baat. Are you an optimist or a pessimist? So, you'll answer. So, I say, nahi, main bade shaan se bolta hu, I'm a realist. So, the moment you say realist, ye to pessimist aadmi hai. Like they say, wo Indori, sher wale. बोले मैं इमरजेंसी में मैंने कहा था कि सरकार चोर है, तो पुलिस मेरे घर पे आई, हम अरेस्ट करेंगे आपको. क्या बोल रहे हैं? सरकार चोर है. सर हाँ, मैंने कहा था सरकार चोर है, मैंने कहा था, आई एडमिट, बट मैंने कहा आई डिडंट से विच सरकार में, वो पाकिस्तानी सरकार है या अमेरिकन सरकार है. तो पुलिस बोलती है, अच्छा हमको बेवकूफ़ समझते हो क्या? हमको मालूम है कौन सरकार चोर है. So this is, the moment you say, are you optimist or pessimist? I'm a realist. Arey boss, I'm a realist. So, like you said, glass is half full or half. So I want to give you a spin which I told Mr. Mashelkar yesterday. So when you say, is the glass half full or half empty? I think the half empty guys are the optimists. Because they are looking at the opportunity. Arey glass to आधा ही भरा हुआ है, आधा और तो भरने का है, हमको chance है, opportunity है. So change the narrative, just twist it around. The half-empty guys are the real optimists. So I'm going to now conclude by saying, and also all this data disagreement and history, we always are fighting about key data, history, but I want to, I have lots of things to say, but I want to conclude by identifying. So I hope I have convinced you that, sir, I'll repeat those 3 words: protect, project, preserve. Protect ourselves, our nation, our people, our resources, project global power, and preserve our sovereignty. So economic interest, economic strength is at the very core of national security. And we have certain things we need to be proud of, but काफ़ी रास्ता बहुत लंबा है. What are the challenges? I disagree with Surjit. I think our female labor force participation, which is our big asset, is low. It's quite low. And we need to refocus on this problem. It might have social factors, cultural factors, economic factors, political factors. You know, women sometimes may not go. Bangalore mein abhi tak the second or third shift was not allowed in garment factories. In Bangladesh, which is 90% or 95% Islamic country, they've had 3 shifts of women. The garment industry is 90% women or 85% women, and they work in 3 shifts. And they are now ahead of India in garment exports, not in relative terms, because they are 1/10 our economy. In absolute terms, $50 billion, we are barely struggling at 40 billion. How did that happen? So, you know, we may disagree about other indices, but actually it is a fact that in many indices, Bangladesh is already ahead of us. Per capita income, human development index, ye falana falana. So Bangalore mein bhi agar women ko working allowed nahi hai, what is it about? Is it safety? That women don't feel safe? Or their parents don't, or their, I don't know. So first challenge is we have to focus on female labor force participation. I think that is Abenomics. The entire Abenomics was based on that. In Japan, they found, Japan also among the Western nations had relatively lower female. So they found that women after their first child, first pregnancy, 70% dropped out. And then they found it difficult to re-enter the workforce because of the absence of creches. So the government actually under Abe, president, who was the longest serving prime minister in post-war Japan, I think he died or he died. He was assassinated, right? Yeah, sorry. But anyway, God bless him. So he undertook public investment. This is a private sector capitalist country. Public investment in creches. 1 million of them, I think. For a Japan, a country which is 1/10 of 1 million creches. Because a young mother who doesn't have the comfort or the, you know, ki mera child is with some safe, you know, creche. Of course, you can have private, you know, modke todke kya mandate, so unregulated. So I'm saying female. Second challenge, delimitation. He mentioned it already, that we are kicking the can of delimitation forever, and this bullet cannot be dodged. We need to have a national dialogue. It should have started many years ago, but we need to have delimitation. Third challenge is about federalism. India is a union of states, they say. We are not a, what do they say? That the states are creation of the union. I don't like to use the word central, sir. Central government gives too much, you know, as if center is the powerful. It's a union. It's a union government, state government. So federalism needs to be strengthened. I mean, we don't have time to discuss that. Then inequality. I strongly believe that inequality in India has crossed limits which collectively as a democracy we must be concerned about. It's no point saying that high growth will take care of inequality. I don't think so. We have to, I mean, Surjit mentioned direct cash transfers. Basically, inequality has several dimensions. Income inequality, wealth inequality, regional inequality, gender inequality, and now after COVID, digital inequality. And then, of course, what to speak of access to good quality education and access to good quality healthcare. You know, you have IITs, now there are 23 of them. So you'll see 15 lakh people applying for IITs for about 10,000 or 20,000 seats. And half the engineering colleges are going empty across 5 states of India, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, blah, blah, blah. They're offering scooters as incentives to join the engineering school. So this is the inequality, right? There are some islands of, some oases of excellence, so-called, and there's a sea of, you know, landscape of desolate education. So that's and the last point, which I don't think I have time, is basically institutions. We need to strengthen institutions which are the very foundation of democratic functioning, their independence, their autonomy, their quality, and their unbiasedness, etc., etc. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
My name is Gautam Bambawale, and my question is addressed to Professor Bhalla. Sir, could you share with us, I would like to know, I don't know if you have studied the data here, but what does the data show on the following question? Will India become old before it becomes rich?
It's a perennial question, but I don't think, depending on your definition of rich, again, you know, a lot of debates that we have is on measurement and definition. Now, I may have a few things to say about measurement definition to what Ajit said, but think about the following. You think China as a society is rich today? And what we get is that India will have the same per capita income as China by 2040, 2042. Developed country, if you define a developed country as rich, there is, and all the advanced countries are developed by definition, almost by definition, and the variation in their per capita income levels is about 3 to 4 times. So what the tendency in India, again, part of the narrative, अरे भाई US कहाँ पे है, हम कहाँ पे हैं, कभी नहीं होगा, मिलन कभी नहीं होगा. Now look at, take Greece, take Portugal, take some of the lower guys, we'll definitely be there at that level. So what I had done when I was asked to define, write an essay on developed country, again, which is I think similar to your question. So there's only one instance of where a country has been classified as being developed, which was classified as being undeveloped or developing, which is Korea. In 1996, they were admitted into the OECD because they were now considered developed. At that time, their per capita income level in PPP terms was 18,000. So I consider, and that's a very objective, that's before the PPP measures started getting confused by China, or not maligned, but manipulated by China in the 2005 series, but perhaps we can discuss that some other time. So I think 18,000 per capita by 2040, 42 is very, we only need to get there, we only need about a 6% growth rate per annum. So short answer to your question is, we will become rich or developed before we become.
Thank you. Next question by Air Chief.
I think all the speakers have reassured me that in 2047 or 2040 or thereabouts, India is well on its way to becoming a developed country. But like Ajit said, I am a realist. You know, we have a habit somehow of winning 10 matches in the World Cup and doing it on the last 10. Can you reassure me that the hurdles have been forethought and we are doing something about them?
I think our greatest strength is our, as I said, the conversations. Democracy is nothing but conversations. So long as we can keep the conversations strong, robust, honest, you should hang on to your high level of optimism. We need the conversations, and that's how we'll function. I mean, in a lighter vein, since you mentioned the 10 matches, India always does the right thing after it explores everything else.
Last two interventions. One is by Mr. Muranikar, and last one then the Bhushan. Muranikar, you have the floor.
And there's a lot of talk about federalism. It was mentioned today. No, there's a lot of talk about about federalism. But if we go through our constitution, the word federal does not happen anywhere. It is used only once when they describe the courts, federal courts. That's the only time the word federal has been used in Indian constitution. So before we talk of federalism, I think we have to define where it comes from and what exactly you mean by that.
You know, I'm not so worried about the meaning and the semantics. Basically, we need to relentlessly decentralize power. Vikendrikaran. If I can just, we need to decentralize power. What is happening is in the country, and he mentioned the Senate of the US, what is happening is that increasingly politics is about power. It's not about ideology. If you look at the political processes in the country, it's all about somehow grabbing power. So, म्हणजे सत्तेचं राजकारण मराठीमध्ये म्हणतात. So we need to actually have a counter to that. We can talk about electoral reforms. Why are the percentage of candidates who have serious criminal records in parliament has consistently and monotonically gone up from 2004 to 2019. 2023 we'll find out. Why? Why are the criminals now? I mean, so therefore, because Satya se Rajkaran, the politics of power, we need to reduce the premium on power, and that can happen only when you decentralize power. We passed some landmark constitutional amendment in 93-94, which is called empowering the third tier. To this day, the FFF, functions, funds and functionaries have not been transferred to the third tier. Even the lowest, the Gram Panchayat mein, the parents are very concerned about their child's education. They have no power on disciplining the teachers. Simple thing like that, which is taken for granted in most of the world. So
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Just 1 second.
Only one comment.
So there is a talk about 5 trillion economy. Which are the sectors that would add to this 5 trillion, and when are we expected realistically to achieve 5 trillion?
Yeah. So which sectors will...
Enable us to make 5 trillion economy.
Yeah. You know, there's a famous story about Korea, which is that the fastest growing export from Korea, and they were planning everything. This industrial, the chaebols, they will be favored, somebody else will be favored. The fastest growing sector was that of wigs, which the central planners didn't know about. The fastest growing sector in India, the most successful, is software, which thankfully the government wasn't involved in. So let it evolve. I mean, we all have our private ideas as to which sector, but you're liable to be proven wrong. So I'd rather let the market and individuals decide where to go. The government should be there to provide incentives, not to direct. Yeah. Should we do it now?
Please do it now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, 2 points. And this female, I cannot let go of, Bangladesh comes up often enough. So when in doubt, bring in Bangladesh. In 2016-17, the labor force participation rate in Bangladesh was 35.6%. In India, in 2022, it was later, and maybe Bangladesh has gone up to 40. In 2022, it was 39.2%, but that includes the age 15 to 24. And a lot of the whole story about low labor force participation rate in India, female labor, is going into education. So now, why don't we use 25 to 64, and 25 to 64, the labor force participation rate in India last year was 46%. You tell me that's low, be my guest. But really, internationally, we are well up there. Maybe the US is at 60, and we'll get there soon. Second, Bangladesh again. Oh, there you go. Their per capita income, you've been reading, Bangladesh per capita income in dollar terms is higher than India, and so on and so forth. So every country upgrades its national accounts when there is a new survey, etc. So India, from upgrading of the national accounts, the GDP for the same year, so we've upgraded, is 8% higher by all our upgrades. Bangladesh holds a record for upgrading. It's 68%. So, and I know from authorities who worked on the Wildlife Fund, etc., that this is fictitious, just as fictitious as the labor force participation rate of women in India, by some accounts.
Hello. Friends, we had 3 most scintillating presentations, and unfortunately I couldn't allow more questions because General Patnagar is a taskmaster. He said we had to break according to schedule, so I apologize to all friends whom I couldn't. I just want to make 3 remarks on outstanding 3 presentations. One issue, as I said, for economic growth is, I think, going to bedevil India, and I'm very worried about it, is social harmony, the state of social harmony, which is really going to may turn on a binding constraint on India's growth. And second corollary of this is the sense of fraternity. I mean, if you look at the Indian Constitution, the one of the most important word is fraternal, and that somehow is getting forgotten. And I think social harmony and fraternity are 2 critical constraints. And other issues I just want to reiterate is, you're right, federalism is not described in, the man who introduced cooperative federalism was S. Guhan, who was that time working with Tamil Nadu government, where a great debate was going on. Remember that very, very peak of movement of DMK. And he described that time India as a cooperative federalism. That's how it came into usage in India. And I think it describes well, in my view, in terms of what really happens. And I just want to argue that we want to deepen this cooperative federalism by empowering the 3rd tier of the government. Today, take for instance Pune mayor. Pune mayor has no power because he has no resources. So we have to transfer resources through to all 3rd tier to bring really next stage of both economic growth and also supply of necessary social goods and services. And here, I want to argue that goods and services taxes is a beautiful instrument to do that. You can share today, you're sharing GST with state and center. You now share it with the 3rd tier with the urban bodies and urban localities to create local public goods. Because urbanization is going to define India's growth path. Everything what is displayed, urbanization is going to the Waterloo, if not done properly, of India's growth ambitions. The second point I want to just tell all of you, and also mention to my friend Surjit, on delimitation, from PIC we have requested probably India's most thoughtful political scientist, Professor Palshikar, will bring out PIC policy papers to debate on delimitation, what can be done, what should be done. So probably during next 6 months, this paper will be ready, and we'll be happy to have you to come in a discussion, because this is a very, very important issue. And there are lots of ideas floating around, but Professor Palshikar is putting together, and we will bring out a paper, because I think that's another very important constraint on India. And last point is some of the institutions. Is really we have to strengthen the guardrails of India's constitution, guardrails for Indian economy. One of the reasons, and I don't know whether Sujit or Ajit will agree with me or not, one of the reasons precisely why India has continued to do well is because 2 deep, great macroeconomic guardrails were produced, one through FRBM on fiscal policies and inflation targeting on monetary policy. It didn't succeed all the time. You have to adjust. But that really strengthened, you have seen in finance ministry, the finance ministry or minister in the government, the central government, and also it's ensured some discipline of state governments through the FRLs. So I think these guardrails are weakening. We have to strengthen these guardrails if we want to maintain the kind of federal system we want and its growth. And really final remark is on women, which all of you raised. I think one of the reasons we don't properly measure the contribution of women in the Indian economy. And I'm going to make the same mistake my professor warned me. I'm going to now argue on the basis of sample size 1, namely my daughter. She did a PhD, she's a scientist, trained scientist, she's PhD. But she has continued to look after her children. And I think the creation of that human capital stock, the time she has allocated, is not appropriately measured. What is happening to India's future growth? So I think we are not measuring properly what women's contribution is in terms of creating quality of life, the quality of human capital in India. And with this, the kind of society we're going to create. So I think we must start measuring properly the women's contribution to Indian economy. Then I think we'll get a right answer and right balance, because I talked to my daughter. I said I was disappointed because she didn't join the workforce, but she explained to me, and now in hindsight I can see what she did probably was right in terms of overall contribution. So I think we have to measure right. We don't measure properly women's contribution to our economy. So with these thoughts, we close this session. Okay, thank you all.